Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, so third culture, like people call it TCK, like third culture kids. They're often kids that are like they're growing up in a culture that's different from their ethnic culture, that's different from the culture that their parents grew up in. And so for me personally, like I'm ethnically South Korean, but
Right.
my parents immigrated to the US when they were young, so they're very Americanized too. Well, they're Korean, but also Americanized. And so I grew up under like a mix of Korean and American culture. And then when I was young, I moved to the UK and I grew up there. And I went to like elementary school and high school there for a good amount of years. And so I've kind of grown up being influenced by lots of different, like at least three different cultures. And we also lived in South Korea for a few years too in my childhood. So a lot of third culture kids feel a lot of a sense of like camaraderie and like yeah, they just feel a sense of camaraderie because we've all grown up with this sense of like rootlessness or like not
Mhm.
feeling like we know where we belong or we know what our identity is. So, yeah, a lot of people who see that, they're like, who are third culture kids too, they reach out to me to like, oh my gosh, I was so happy to see you're also a third culture kid. Like, because it's so formative in shaping your identity and shaping your beliefs, your values, your perspectives on life, like your relationships. So yeah.
Do you feel like that makes it hard to get close to people when you're always traveling and moving, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think when I was younger, my mentality was I'm not gonna be here in like another year. I'm only gonna be here for a year or two. And so that definitely affected like the way that I made friendships. I saw everything as temporary. I remember when I was a kid or just even a teenager, I would wake up from like sleeping and before I would open my eyes, I would be like, which house am I in? Which room am I in? Because
Wow.
there were so many different houses, so many different rooms that
I
sometimes I
feel
would
like
get
you hear that
confused.
with army kids. You know, like I don't
Yeah,
really like. I would think almost that you were an army kid, but
yeah,
you're
yeah.
not.
People always ask me that. Like when I say that I moved around every other year in like three different continents, they're like, "Oh, was your dad in the army, or were your parents like missionaries?" So yeah,
But
definitely I
for
get
you,
that
it
question.
was the missionaries. Your parents are.
Yeah, well, I guess they were technically missionaries. My parents were church planters growing up, and so that's kind of the reason why we moved every other year. Yeah.
And I'm curious, being someone who's moved a lot, your parents are somewhat missionaries, they church planters. How does that sound? How is that reflected in your music? Because when I hear your music, you hear these different genres. And I'll just be honest with you. I was like, yo, at some point she probably grew up in a more soulful place, you know? Like there's
Yeah.
some notes you hit, some riffs you hit. I'm like, yeah, she has some soul in her.
Thank you
Is
so
do you
much.
feel like that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, being like a Korean American woman, like I feel like people are often really surprised when they listen to my voice or my music because it's not what you typically you typically see. I definitely attribute that looking back to like moving around and being so like exposed to different cultures throughout my childhood, like American culture, British culture, Korean culture, and yeah, I spent a lot of my like teenage and adolescent years in the UK, and there's actually a lot of music has roots in the UK. I mean, like the Beatles and like
Yeah.
a lot of
Did
soul
you ever
too.
get to go to like Abbey Road and all that or no?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,